Welcome in to episode 17 of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we've got a lot to discuss for you. Just wanted to start out with a little housekeeping. First off, I saw some comments about the audio being a little low in the full-length video that was posted on YouTube last time. Hopefully the audio is much better this time. I was recovering from a cold as well, but I have tested it, and I believe that the audio should be much better this time. So please, drop in the comments if that is not the case, and I'll keep tweaking it so that it's, to everyone's liking. The other thing that I want to discuss is I'm actually going on a trip over to Europe. And on the plane ride, I plan to actually put together some content that's going to be going up on Substack, some written content regarding the players. So if anybody liked the breakdowns that I had regarding the incoming transfers as well as the incoming freshmen, I'm going to be doing a little bit more in-depth writing regarding those. I'm also kind of looking out at the assistant coaching spot. If I do see anything about an assistant coach, maybe while I'm abroad or otherwise, I might try to do some research and write up an article on whoever we hire for that assistant as well. But my plan is to try to get some articles written so that I can start dropping some content here coming up very soon on the written medium over on Substack. The podcast will be going on, of course, but I'm going to be abroad for a couple of weeks, so look forward to the end of June being, beginning of July being the next upload. There's not too much been happening, but I'm happy to cover anything that comes up. As always, stay, if you're interested in all the content, please follow me on Twitter, YouTube, Substack. That's where you're going to get all the content and any updates regarding anything that might be going on. So we've got a couple of things we want to discuss today. Today is going to be a little bit schedule heavy. We're going to talk Alabama basketball schedule, the non-conference that I mentioned last episode that we were going to cover. We're going to cover the non-conference schedule. We're missing a few games. Thankfully, only one of them I think is going to be super duper important that we will absolutely cover as soon as it comes out. And then we actually got some times, albeit what they were, for Alabama football. So I'm going to discuss those Alabama football game times. And then there's another piece of really big news, and that's actually what we're going to start this show with. So a piece of really big news that came out, and it came out earlier, I guess the end of last week. Alabama approved a $59 million expansion / renovation when it comes to Coleman Coliseum, and it really is a practice facility, right? Greg Byrne has often talked about what Nate Oates is most concerned about is practice and locker rooms and things that the players actually interact with. Because when you're talking about recruiting and you're talking about the environment, at the end of the day, the players are only really in the game time gym, right? The Coleman Coliseum. They're really only on that for the game day, right? For pregame shoot around and for the actual game itself. So it's really more of a fan experience. However, the practice gym and the practice facilities and the locker room, that's really where the players are going to spend the lion's share of their time, where they're going to spend the majority of their time. So that's by far what Nate Oates is most concerned about. And this is a huge step in that direction in getting him a new practice facility that would be better for the players. The plan for this is going to actually be in the parking lot of Coleman Coliseum, toward the back of the parking lot, closest to the bridge. If you're familiar with how Coleman Coliseum is, the bridge that comes over from 15th Street, that's going to be, where this new facility is going to be located. So that was approved by the Finance Committee. They're going to start breaking ground on that very soon. Looking here, it is going to be a 14,000 square foot expansion in that southeast corner of Coleman Coliseum, as I mentioned, and a 19,000 square foot renovation of existing space in the facility. So again, Nate Oates has said that's going to be their highest priority, and this mentions in totality the product will include a new practice facility and weight room, new sports medicine spaces, film and team meeting rooms, locker rooms, lounges, coach and staff areas for both men's and women's basketball. Right, so that is the goal with that, and then at the end of the day, and then it says during the Finance Committee meeting on Thursday, Burns says the plan is to break ground in the fall with the goal of having this fully operational by 2026, right? So this is something that is they're going to try to get going as quickly as possible. And the goal is by next season, right? By next basketball season, that it's going to be operational. Its construction is not to hinder any of Coleman Coliseum's normal operations, including games, right? So this is a situation where this is a benefit to the players. This season they're going to be going to be trying to get all the construction done, and then hopefully next season the players will be able to fully utilize that, and that's going to be huge for the team moving forward, right? At the end of the day, like I said, when Nate Oates talks about recruiting, the part that he mentions the most is, the facilities that Alabama has are really, really nice, but this is a full step up. This is, just above and beyond. And as you've seen how they've been able to recruit, I'm really happy to see what they're going to be able to do with this level, and I think they're going to be able to keep it going for years to come. So now we're going to transition over to Alabama basketball schedule. Like I said, I mentioned in the last episode, we talked a little bit about the conference schedule and who Alabama had in the splits. Now we're going to actually go through the non-conference schedule. Nate Oates has once again scheduled absolutely tremendously. There is, just absolute heavy hitters on this. But I think that there's also a few, at the end of the day, there needs to be some easier games on there. A couple of the easier games we have not heard come out yet. We're still missing what are probably going to be two early bye games, if you will, and one that's probably going to happen around Christmas time. Those have not been mentioned yet. There have been a few of the quote-unquote easier games mentioned, but Nate Oates, from what we have today, the first game we have mentioned, and we know for sure, is on the 11th, the Monday, Alabama's going to be hosting McNeese State. And if you know anything about McNeese State, it is not a cakewalk. McNeese State probably will be a top 25 team. They're coached by our Will Wade, from LSU, all the, get out of here, all the stuff that went down with Trendon Watford, all of the allegations, all the FBI, rest in peace, Fluff, everything that comes with Will Wade, So back to Coleman Coliseum, I think that's going to be a really, really fun game, and that's going to be one that, is not your average bye game. That is not a bye game, and it I think, will be a good test early for some guys that have the ability to play power conference basketball, because the way the transfer portal is shaping up and, has worked out, McNeese State has a lot of guys on that roster that were at power conference just last year, right? So I think Will Wade has done a great job at McNeese. He did well in getting to the tournament this past season, and I really do think he's going to give us a tough test. Then later that week, they play at Purdue. So this is rekindling, I guess, the pseudo rivalry, that happened in Canada this past season. So it was announced that Alabama is getting a home and home with Purdue, similar to the home and home they have with Creighton, which we'll talk about just a bit later. And the home and home with Purdue starts this season at Mackey Arena on the 15th. So that Friday, so Monday, McNeese, and then that Friday they'll be traveling to Mackey Arena to take on Purdue. I think Purdue is going to be really, really good this year. Matt Painter's done such a good job. They're not going to have Zach Edey, so it is going to be a different look Purdue team. But, I'm going to trust in Matt Painter, trust in his ability to do well with that team. I think that Matt Painter is a really good coach, and I really do expect that to be a very good game. Going at Purdue, I do not think is going to be easy, to say the least. Then is the game in Birmingham. So this season, our game in Birmingham is going to be hosting Illinois on the 20th. So, again, I would expect these are straight, McNeese, Purdue, Illinois. And that is three, just back-to-back-to-back, really, really tough games. Like I said, I do expect that there probably will be a game or two before that McNeese State game. But that's just a heavy start to the season. McNeese, Purdue, Illinois is a very, very heavy slate to start the season. Illinois, I expect probably to be a fringe top 25 team. I think Illinois, it's really going to depend on how their transfers do, how their incoming players do. I think that Illinois is going to be a really good team, but ceases to be seen exactly how good Illinois will be. But I do think Illinois will be a very good team coming into this season. For reference, while I'm talking, I will pull up Jeff Goodman's rankings just so that I can go for reference. What some people are expecting by each of these teams, because Alabama has a litany of teams in the top 25 on the rankings, especially if you include the SEC teams that they're going to be playing as well. So, as I mentioned, the next one's Illinois. Then is the MTE. So, for those of you not familiar with what an MTE is, the MTEs are what happens around Thanksgiving weekend, right? So, Thanksgiving weekend is often what are called these MTEs, and it's these tournaments that everyone is involved in. Most teams are involved in. There's like the Battle for Atlantis, there's Maui, and there's actually a new MTE this year, and that's the MTE that we're going to be involved in, and it's called the Players Era in Vegas. All the specifics have not come out as to how this will work out. The reports that we've heard from Matt Norlander and some others are that supposedly it's about $1 million per team that's going toward NIL that is going to be given for being in this tournament, as well as potentially $1 million for the winner to split amongst the players on the winning team. That's just some early reports from what we had heard maybe coming at, or maybe a part of this tournament. All the specifics for this tournament have not come out, but they have confirmed who is in the tournament. And from what we have heard, this is not like a true this is a true tournament, but it is not going to be run in a true like bracket style format. It's going to be Alabama. It's a 4-team pods, and each team is going to play each other. So Alabama is set to play Houston, Rutgers, and Notre Dame, right? So obviously, if we're going by what the most important things on that are going to be, is first off, Alabama versus Houston, right? Alabama, I'm sure Houston is going to be looking for revenge after losing to Alabama both games of the home and home, as well as just looking to knock off what's going to be a really, really good team. I think Houston's going to be really good this season. Obviously, I think Alabama's going to be really good this season. So I think that the two of those teams are going to be a great matchup. Then we look at Rutgers. Rutgers is going to have a lot of storylines. Because Rutgers is where Cliff Amore came from, right? So you have the Cliff Amore matchup in Vegas. I think that's going to be a really, really good matchup. Rutgers also has 2 highly touted incoming freshmen coming in with Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. So that's going to be another matchup that I would expect. I think that Rutgers is going to be a pretty good team this year. It's going to ceases to be seen exactly how good, just due to the fact that Bailey and Harper are going to be freshmen. They're going to be, I'm sure, going to be placing some heavy reliance on those two guys. And so because of that, I do expect that it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for them. And since Alabama is going to be playing Rutgers early in the season, I think that bodes well for Alabama. Even if Rutgers does seem to be able to put it together, I do think that Alabama playing them early in the season has a very good chance of winning the game. I have John Fanta's top 25 here pulled up. So for reference, Fanta currently has Houston at number 4, Purdue at number 10, which we have mentioned both of those. Creighton, which actually is next up, is at 14. And then we've got the SEC teams of Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, A&M, Arkansas, all on this list as well. It looks like he does not have McNeese in his top 25. I do know of some other people that do. And again, Illinois currently not showing in that top 25. I think that they will be trying to battle for, near that 25th spot if I was betting. So then on the 14th for that Players Era tournament, that's going to be on the 26th through the 29th. I believe the games on that are the 26th, the 27th, and the 29th, skipping Christmas Day, the 28th, if I'm not mistaken. Thanksgiving Day, the 28th, if I'm not mistaken. And then Alabama gets to host Creighton, a rematch of the game from last season that Alabama dropped in Omaha. I think this is going to be a really, really big game, especially with Ryan Kalkbrenner being back for Creighton. They do lose Baylor Shireman, I believe, and a couple other players. So I believe that Creighton is going to, maybe, I think that they may be worse, but at the end of the day, when you have a guy like Ryan Kalkbrenner down low, I think that Creighton and the style of offense that they play is going to be able to do well. Right, I think that Creighton has done a really good job. I think Greg McDermott has done a really good job with that roster, and I think that getting Ryan Kalkbrenner back is huge. So I would not expect that to be a walk in the park by any stretch of the imagination, but the rematch from last season is huge. Then we look at North Dakota. And this is a surprise for anybody that may not have paid attention to what happened. But Alabama announces they're going to be going to North Dakota on the 18th of December. And I'm sure there are some questions as to why is the University of Alabama playing at North Dakota? And the answer is very simple. Home game for Grant. This is a way I feel confident in Alabama being able to pay back Grant Nelson for coming back for his senior season, for his final season, I guess. This is a way for Alabama to be able to thank him for, all he's been able to give to the university. This is a way for Alabama to, be able to give him that extra, give his family a home game for him in his hometown, or near his hometown, I should say, and be able to Alabama get a bye game out of it. North Dakota is not very good, so this is Alabama at the end of the day when you see the rest of the schedule and who Nate Oates has put on it. Like I said, I've mentioned McNeese, Purdue, Illinois, the tournament, Creighton. Right, there's some really heavy hitters on this, and I'm actually still missing that SEC ACC challenge, which as soon as I hear who we pull for that, I will definitely be bringing that up on the next podcast that I record after that. But we currently do not know who we're drawing for the challenge. But with all of the teams already in the list, Alabama needs some easy games. And what better way than to give one of your players that took a chance on Alabama and is now coming back for another season, which coming into the year, I don't know if you heard all the stuff last season, there was a lot of talk of Grant Nelson trying to go to the draft. And so the fact that he's willing to come back, put the draft off for another season, try to win a national title for Alabama and be that stalwart at the 4, I think it's huge. And so for me, I think that it's a really, really good game for Alabama to kind of thank one of the players that got it to where it is today. He was a big key reason why they went on the Final Four run last season. I think that it's a really, really good opportunity for Alabama to be able to thank a player that got them where they are. So I think that that's going to be a big one. It's a 2-for-1, I believe. So we're playing at North Dakota this season, and then the next 2 seasons they will be coming back to Coleman Coliseum. So they will be some of the bye games for the future. And at the end of the day, you need those games. So I think that that's, more than sufficient. North Dakota is not nearly as good of a team as Alabama would normally schedule, but I think that you definitely make the exception, when you're looking at looking at that. I think that the strength of schedule piece may hurt us just a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's going to be on the road, and I think that Alabama will have more than enough high quadrant wins to be able to bolster a really, really good NCAA tournament resume to compete for a top seed. So I'm not at all concerned about it. And then the final team is Kent State. That's the final game that we're aware of as of this moment. Like I said, I expect, and from what I'm seeing, there's probably set to be 4 more games announced, and that's the SEC ACC Challenge, and then 3 basically bye games, 2 of them early, and then 1 probably just after Christmas or around the Christmas time. Since the Kent State game is on the 22nd, my gut would be just after Christmas, just before SEC play starts. The last few seasons, like this past season, I believe we played Eastern Kentucky in that little time frame. One of those is kind of where I would expect the next easy games, so to speak, to come from. So we've got 4 more games that are set to be announced. I definitely will be covering when those games are announced, just making sure everyone is aware. If you'll follow along on Twitter, that's where I'm sure we'll talk about it first. As I mentioned, the other thing that I'm kind of on the lookout for is who the assistant coach is going to be. The names that I had heard floated around, and based on some conversations that Nate Oates had in the media, it sounds like he's going back to the NBA for this one. And so with the NBA Finals currently going on, I had heard potentially somebody that was on the Bucks or the Timberwolves. So I honestly don't know who it's going to be. But there were some names floated on some of those teams. So now that they're completely out of the NBA playoffs, I would expect that to potentially gain some steam, and especially gain some additional steam after the NBA Finals is over. The Finals is currently going on, so we should not have to wait too terribly long for that to come to fruition. So if you'll keep on the lookout for that, that's something that I'm expecting probably to come out in the coming 2 to 3 weeks, maybe. So that is probably some of the next basketball news. And I know I have not talked a ton about football, and it's just because, as you may have heard me mention in the past, I'm not a huge spring football person. There's a lot of things that happen in spring football that are not going to happen for the future and are not going to mean a whole lot for the future. I mean, a good example is, like, for example, the center, right? We have Brockermeyer as our center, and then all of a sudden Brockermeyer enters the transfer portal, and Parker Brailsford looks to be the starting center. When Brailsford comes in, it was all but expected. Yeah, he's going to be the starting center. And then you hear, oh, Brockermeyer's doing awesome. And then all of a sudden Brailsford's the guy. So, there's a lot of things like that end up happening during spring football. And so I try not to dive too deeply into that, because at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen. They're just now learning the new system. They're just now learning the new coaches. And I think that having too many overreactions to the spring are just unreasonable. As some things start to come out now, we've got a lot of recruiting that's happening. I'm not a huge football recruiting person just because of how many recruits there are. So I am not your person when it comes to super in-depth recruiting knowledge on the football side of things. I will say Alabama has been able to do a really good job. I think they currently hold like the number 3 recruiting class. They were able to get a big flip from Keon Russell, the quarterback from Duncanville, Texas, that was previously committed to SMU. From my understanding, he is the quarterback that they kind of set their sights on for next year's class, and had kind of maybe taken a step back from Juju Lewis. So that is my understanding when we're talking about quarterback and, where Alabama has looked at that position. Like I said, they were able to get the flip of the commitment from Keon Russell. So that is a huge, huge commitment. And I think that he will be able to fit what Kalen DeBoer wants to do really, really well. But I will say, if you're interested in recruiting knowledge, the guys in On3 do a really good job. There's quite a few different beat reporters that do a really, really good job. when it comes to Alabama football recruiting. And like I said, I keep up with basketball recruiting a little bit more than football recruiting. I will say, for anybody that may have jumped the gun a little early and saw Will Riley visiting for basketball, I think that if Alabama had an open spot on the roster, he was a very high likelihood of somebody we could get for a reclass. But my understanding is he's still looking at potentially reclassing. And if he does reclass, then a team like Kentucky, is pretty high up on his list, because Alabama obviously has the full roster of 13 scholarship guys. So he did visit Alabama. I do not expect that to go anywhere. Excuse me. I do not expect that we're going to be landing that commitment. I think he's a really good player. But I do think that Alabama, because he's looking to reclass, I do think the Alabama's roster is obviously full, and there's not going to be much we're going to be able to do for him. So, wish him the best, but I think he's probably going to be committing elsewhere. So let's get into what we have heard about the football schedule, and I'm actually going to pop it up here on the screen. They released a graphic earlier this week. So from what we know about the football schedule, we now have a few game times. However, there are quite a few game times that we are unaware of. So we don't know as many game times as we would hope, but we do have a pretty good idea. So for the opening matchup, we have a 6 p.m. under the lights in Bryant-Denny on the 31st against Western Kentucky, followed by on the 7th, another 6 p.m., so back-to-back night games to open it up in Bryant-Denny. Then we have a college noon kickoff on Fox at Wisconsin, Camp Randall. So Wisconsin, that's going to be an 11 a.m. kick, big noon kickoff for Fox. Then we have an off week, and then the next week will be the home game against Georgia, and that is going to be 6:30 on ABC. So that one obviously is in prime time. Then for the Vandy game, we know it's either 2:30 or 3:30. So we have a pretty good idea that it's going to be the mid-afternoon game. So that is when the Vandy game is going to be. That's going to be at Vanderbilt. Then the home game against South Carolina, we know it's going to be an 11 a.m. Against South Carolina. That's going to be at Bryant-Denny. They're not sure of the provider, whether it's going to be ABC or ESPN, but again, we have an idea. We have a good idea of the time. Then we have our 5 flex games. We have at Tennessee, home against Missouri, at LSU, at Oklahoma, and home against Auburn. All 5 of those games are going to either be 2:30 or 7 o'clock. For anybody that pays a lot of attention to the way Alabama games have gone in years past, that should surprise basically no one. Honestly, the fact that we have an 11 a.m. for a actually we have 2 11 a.m.s for non-cupcake, non-conference games is pretty surprising to me. We have the Wisconsin Big Noon kickoff, due to the Big Ten's commitment with Fox. That's not shocking at all, actually. The Big Noon kickoff makes complete sense with that. However, the 11 o'clock against South Carolina is a little surprising to me. Alabama very rarely has those early kickoffs for the bigger games or, for SEC games. Typically, we're having that 2:30 or 7 o'clock. So the 2:30 or 7 o'clock flex time for those 5 games isn't the best because you still don't have a full idea, but at least our suspicions are confirmed. Those are going to be in the prime time slots, and it's just going to be, whether they go all the way down to the, prime time at 7 p.m. or is it going to be just a 2:30, midweek game. This obviously is the first season that the ESPN contract is under, so you'll notice all of these games are on ESPN, ABC, with the exception of the Fox game against Wisconsin. And I guess even the Mercer game is going to be an SEC Network Plus, so that's going to be free with SEC Network, or I'm sure ESPN Plus will also have it. So again, all of these are going to be on ESPN subsidiaries, so it's not going to be CBS. So the 2:30 games, again, just as a heads up, those are going to be ESPN 2:30 games, not CBS 2:30 games, as this is the new ESPN contract. So as I mentioned, that's the little bit of football news we have. Like I said, we have Keon Russell flipping his commitment from SMU. We have some other commitments that have come along. I'm sure they've had plenty of practice visitors. And people, taking official visits to Alabama. I've seen different things, with guys coming through. But as I mentioned, I am not going to be your basis of Alabama football recruiting news. Just want to be completely honest when it comes there. I'm not the basketball recruiting guy. I do follow it a lot more closely, and it's partially because there's just less guys. When you're looking at basketball recruiting, it's a 13-man roster. And, at most you're talking about a class of, 4 to 6 guys at the absolute most. And so it's just a little bit easier to follow because the position needs and stuff just makes a little bit more sense. So that's really where I place a lot of my focus when it comes to recruiting. But like I said, I will be breaking down some positions and what to look forward to when it comes to football. I think my plan is to do the breakdowns for the basketball team here coming up, like I said, on this flight, and I may even start some of the football ones as well. And then my plan is to release, I have not picked the dates yet, or the days yet, but maybe do a 1 basketball, 1 football write-up per week starting in July. And so in July and August, have, a basketball player and then a position group for football, right? So maybe I do a breakdown of Darian Reed and a breakdown of the quarterback room for Alabama. That's how I think I'm going to do it, so that anybody who's interested in whatever sport has everything that they would be interested in covered, and you can, stay involved with all the content that I'm putting out. As always, the YouTube videos will continue, so if you are interested in anything specific, please let me know. I'm happy to shoot a video as soon as I get back from my trip. So I'm happy to cover whatever people are interested in. Thank you so much for all the new subscribers. I really appreciate it. And I will catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.